By 1943, Germany was bleeding. Allied bombers darkened the skies daily, factories burned, and the Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, was now fighting for survival. The Allies had quantity. Germany needed a miracle. That miracle began not in a general's office, but in the quiet halls of a factory in Augsburg. There, engineers under the brilliant and stubborn Willy Messerschmitt were dreaming of something that defied the laws of flight. A plane powered not by propellers, but by jets of fire. It sounded like science fiction. The Me-262, the first operational jet fighter in history. But it wasn't born in triumph. It was born in chaos, doubt, and tragedy.
When the first prototype, the Me-262V1, rolled out in 1942, even its creators doubted it would fly. Jet engines were unstable, prone to explosions, and could barely last 10 hours before breaking apart. Still, test pilot Fritz Wendel climbed into the cockpit on July 18, 1942. The skies over Leipheim airfield were quiet. He throttled forward, and for the first time, the scream of a jet tore across the Bavarian fields. Witnesses described the sound as a banshee's wail from another world. For a few glorious minutes, the Me-262 soared, smooth, sleek, unstoppable. It was the future in a war trapped in the past. But that future came with problems. Engines overheated, caught fire, and melted themselves from within. Each test flight was a gamble between genius and disaster.
When Adolf Hitler showed him the prototype, he was impressed, but also confused. He didn't see a defensive fighter, he saw a bomber. Make it a blitz bomber, he demanded. He wanted a weapon to strike London, not protect Berlin. Messerschmitt protested, his engineers pleaded, but Hitler's word was law. Precious months were wasted redesigning the Me-262 as a bomber, a role it was never meant to fill. By the time it was allowed to become a fighter again, Germany's skies were already lost. Historians agree this single decision delayed the Me-262's mass deployment by nearly a year that could have changed the course of the air war.
When the Me-262 finally reached combat squadrons in mid-1944, it was unlike anything the Allies had ever seen. Its speed, 870 kilometers per hour, made it untouchable. It could dive through bomber formations, unleash a storm of 30mm cannon fire, and vanish before escort fighters could react. Allied pilots were terrified. Some called it the Schwalbe, the Swallow. Others simply the Jet. But for every miracle in the air, there was a nightmare on the ground. The engines, Jumo 004s, required rare metals like chromium and nickel, materials that Germany no longer had. Each engine lasted barely 25 hours before failing. Fuel was scarce, pilots were inexperienced, and the Allies bombed production plants relentlessly. One mechanic recalled, "We built machines faster than men could learn to fly them. They died in fire before mastering the throttle."
Only a handful of elite pilots ever mastered the Me-262. Among them, Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's ace of aces. He saw in the jet Germany's last chance to fight back. Galland's squadron, Jagdverband 44, became a legend, a band of veterans flying against impossible odds. They called themselves the Squadron of Experts. In one sortie over Munich, Galland's jet tore through a formation of B-17 bombers, destroying 3 in under a minute. He escaped only by diving at 900 kilometers per hour, the fastest man alive at that moment. But even Galland knew the truth. Skill and courage couldn't replace fuel, or trained men, or time. Each victory was paid for with more loss. By the winter of 1944, even these heroes were running out of luck.
When the Allies first recovered wreckage of an Me-262, they were stunned. British engineers studying the design admitted, quietly, that it was a decade ahead of its time. The Allies developed counter-tactics. They began targeting Me-262s during takeoff and landing, when the jet's low acceleration made it vulnerable. Airfields were cratered, refueling trucks destroyed, and pilots hunted as they climbed from their cockpits. Despite this, the Me-262's psychological impact was enormous. It forced the Allies to reconsider what air power meant. It was a glimpse of the future, but one Germany would not live to see.
As Allied bombers pounded Germany, the Me-262's production moved underground. Caves, mines, and tunnels became secret assembly lines. Thousands of forced laborers, many of them prisoners, worked in suffocating darkness to build the wonder weapon. They carved out factories by hand, breathing dust, surrounded by guards with rifles. Few survived to see daylight again. One survivor later recalled, "We built machines that killed, but we were already dying ourselves." This chapter of the Me-262's story is rarely told. The cost in human lives for every piece of metal that touched the sky.
By early 1945, Germany's front lines were collapsing. Yet, Me-262 squadrons continued to fly, desperate and defiant. They struck Allied bomber streams with astonishing speed, but there were too few of them too late. Even as the Reich fell in flames, engineers and pilots clung to the illusion of a miracle weapon. Some Me-262s were destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. Others were hidden in barns or buried in mud, forgotten for decades. The last Me-262 combat sortie took place in late April 1945, days before Hitler's death.
When the war ended, both sides raced to claim the remnants of the Me-262. The Americans took the jets and their engineers under Operation Paperclip. The Soviets seized factories, blueprints, and technicians. Within just 5 years, nearly every major air force, the US, the USSR, the UK, was flying jet fighters. All of them owed a debt, however unwilling, to the Me-262. The first jet dogfights over Korea were fought with its descendants, the F-86 Sabre and the MiG-15. In that sense, the ghost of the Me-262 still haunted the skies. Behind the gleaming steel and the roar of jet engines, there were people. Engineers who believed they were building the future. Prisoners who built wings they would never see fly. Pilots who climbed into cockpits knowing they might never land. It's easy to marvel at the technology, the first jet, the fastest plane, but history is made by hands, not machines. The Me-262 changed the world, but at a terrible cost. It was a triumph of engineering and a tragedy of humanity.
Today, only a handful of Me-262s still exist, restored in museums or rebuilt for flight. Their engines still scream like they did in 1944, a sound both magnificent and terrifying. Visitors stare at the curved metal and imagine what it must have been like. The fire, the fear, the belief that one invention could turn the tide of history. The Me-262 didn't save the Third Reich, but it changed aviation forever. Every modern jet owes its lineage to this machine, born in desperation, forged in chaos, and remembered as the jet that shouldn't have existed.